Good day everyone, I am your reporter for today. I am Roderick DeGracia Jr. So our topic is about holistic versus analytic rubrics. But before we move on to the main topic, let's discuss first the rubric. Rubric is typically an evaluation tool or set of guidelines used to promote the consistent application of learning expectation, learning objectives, or learning standard in the classroom, or to measure their attainment against a consistent set of criteria. It helps teachers authentically monitor a student's learning process and develop and revise a lesson plan. Rubrics are also great for students. They let students know what is expected of them and demystify grades by clearly stating in age-appropriate vocabulary the expectation for a project. For a particular task you assign student, do you want to be able to assess how well the students perform on each criterion? Or do you want to get a more global picture of the student's performance on the entire task? The answer will get if you determine the type of rubrics you chose. Okay, are you ready to learn? So now, let's start with holistic rubrics. It is a single criterion rubrics used to assess participant overall achievement of an activity based on predefined achievement level and provide a single score based on overall impression of a student's performance or on a task. Holistic rubrics it assess student work as a whole. As you can see in this example of holistic rubrics which provide a single score for all students' performance tasks, which 4 is the highest and 1 is the lowest, which indicated the description of each score. If the student meet those levels, you could be able to get the score easily. Now, let's tackle analytic rubric. Analytic rubric it is the articulate levels of performance for each criterion so the teacher can assess student performance on each criterion. A teacher could assess student has done poor, good, or excellent job and allows you to assess participant achievement based on multiple criteria using a single break. Analytic rubrics identify and assess components of a finished product. As you can see in the example of analytic rubric, which is two-dimensional rubrics, which levels of achievement and scoring scale as rows and assessment criteria and standard for performance as columns. To these rubrics, you could be able to assess each levels of achievement based on multiple criteria using a single rubric. You can assign different value to different criteria and include an overall achievement by totaling criteria and you could get the points. The next question is when to choose an holistic rubrics. It is tend to use holistic rubrics when quick or gross judgment need to be made. If assessment is minor like brief homework assignment, so it's sufficient to apply an holistic judgment to quickly review student works. Holistic rubrics are best to use when there is no single correct answer or response and the focus is overall quality, proficiency, or understanding of specific content or skills. Some tasks is not easy to evaluate performance in one criterion independently of performance in a different criterion. For example, many writing rubrics are holistic because it's not always easy to disentangle clarity from organization or content from presentation. So when to choose analytic rubrics? Analytic rubrics are more common because teachers typically want to assess each criterion separately, particularly for student performance that involve a larger number of criteria. It becomes more and more difficult to assign a level of performances in a holistic rubric as the number of criteria increases. Additionally, an analytic rubric better handles weighting of criteria. Analytic rubric is best for dance performance, role play, and etc. Next question arises is how many levels should I include in my rubric? There is no specific number of levels of a rubric should or should not possess. It depends on tasks and needs. A rubric can have as few as 2 levels of performance, as many as you decide. It is not true that there must be even or odd number of levels depend on situation. It is better to start with smaller number of level of performance for each criterion and expand if necessary. 2 or 3 broad categories is difficult enough as the number of levels increases and judgment become finer and finer. The likelihood of error increases. We recommend the fewer levels of performance be included initially because such is easier and quicker to administer, easier to explain to students and others, and easier to expand than larger rubrics to shrink. The smaller number of levels of a performance, the better and less complicated. I recommend that you begin with a small number of levels of performance. Once you have applied the rubric, you can better judge if you need to expand the levels to more effectively capture and communicate variation in student performance. I hope at the end of my report, you are able to assess what rubrics you will use and different tasks as we become a teacher in the future, so we could give a rightful score and points to our student. Thank you everyone and keep safe.